I'll start off by framing, how it is that this panel came together, and then we'll introduce the panelists and have some discussion. I do want to say at the outset that you might have noticed there are some microphones on either side here, and those are for all of you. So we will be opening up to question and to conversation, and so I hope you'll take advantage of this opportunity to ask us about how we think about innovation, what our challenges are, and what's worked for us. So back to the beginning, how did this panel come about? Well, Mary Lou told me that on New Year's Eve, she was reading a report that my colleagues in the front row here put together on the 100 most innovative companies in the world. So, we put together these reports based on the information that we have within Thomson Reuters, within our IP Solutions group. We collect patent information from nearly every country in the world, and our clients use that to stimulate innovation within their own organizations. But we took that information, really turned it on its side, and examined the patent information in a few ways to identify the most innovative companies in the world. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the study. So we do look at volume of patents. We do think that that's an indication, but it's not the most important factor. We look at the quality of an IP portfolio. So we look at the ratio of patent applications to how often the patents are granted. Anyone can file for a patent, but it's really securing that patent that gives you that right to exploit your innovation. We look at how global a portfolio is. We look at the ratio of patents that are filed in the US and China, Japan, and at the European Patent Office. The criteria that is most interesting to me, though, is how influential a portfolio is. And so to measure that, we look at how frequently a patent portfolio is cited by other organizations. So we take those criteria, and we have created an algorithm that we use to identify the 100 most innovative organizations in the world. And there are 46 of the 100 that are US-based organizations. So I don't know if that surprises you, that it's only 46, but it's 46. But what I'm really happy to tell you is that 3 of those 46 are based here in Connecticut. Very impressive. And you're right, whoever started to clap, it is a huge accomplishment. And I think that I grew up in New England, I grew up in Maine, and so I know what it's like to be a New Englander, and we don't really shout about our success. And I think it's something to be incredibly proud of. And so that, I think, was the origin of the panel. And so Mary Lou and my colleagues from Thomson Reuters have put together a terrific panel. We have folks from large organizations. We have someone from a startup organization and someone from an organization that uses innovation to change the face of the world in emerging economies. So I think that we're set for a terrific conversation. So what I'd like to do now is ask each of the panelists to introduce yourself and to talk about why innovation is so important to you. So Karti, may I start with you?
Sure. Can you hear me? Does this work? Great. So my name is Karti Subramanian. I am a co-founder of a company called Vera Solutions. We are a technology consultancy and sort of app development firm working primarily in developing countries. So the idea behind our work is that there are thousands of NGOs and now social businesses. So businesses using a for-profit business model to deliver goods and services to the world's poor and to view the world's poor as sort of a market opportunity. And so there are organizations all over the world sort of trying to do social good, and they really don't have access to very good data. So sort of in the post-financial crisis world, there's increasingly squeezed philanthropic funding. In sort of there was a literature sort of in the 90s that international foreign aid doesn't really correlate to macroeconomic growth. So there's sort of increased scrutiny on various types of social service programs. So our thinking is that these organizations really do need better access to more high quality, more real-time data to understand the impact of their work. So I live in Nairobi, Kenya, which is, I don't know if this is a sort of an expression you guys have heard. It's called the Silicon Savannah of the world. But there's an incredible push for innovation. There's Google's opening their first Africa office there. GE is actually opening their first Africa office there. So there's sort of a wealth of investment and technology and sort of focus on innovation. So we are building apps for various types of organizations in Africa. We have an office in India as well. Right, so my background is sort of in math, economics, and international development. I worked in finance for a while, and then went to South Africa to work for an HIV prevention organization. So this was an organization trying to innovate, in this case, in sort of the public health space. HIV sort of has been around a while. It's sort of a pretty deep structural entrenched problem, and they were trying to find innovative ways to reach out to kids and try and stop the disease, the spread of the disease at sort of a fairly young age. So that's where I sort of, we had the idea for, well, these organizations need to actually know whether they're having, are they actually averting new infections of HIV, and they need to sort of understand the impact and be able to sort of use that information. And so that's where sort of the idea for Vera Solutions came from. Yeah, so well.
Great. So speaking of health, Mick, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why innovation is so important to you?
Thanks. So my name is Mick Correll, and it really gives me great pleasure to be here today to be a part of such a fantastic panel and to talk about a topic that's been very important to me in my career, and that is innovation. So I work in a field called computational biology. What does this mean? We use computers, we study biology, but what does it really mean? So I'll give you a little bit of background first. So life sciences is an area that's seen tremendous innovation over the past 2 decades. And much of this innovation has been driven by technologies that have stemmed from the Human Genome Project. The genome is, of course, we can think of this as a sequence about 3 billion base pairs long. It's in every single one of our cells, and it encodes for all the molecules that enable and create the human organism. The first human genome was completed in the year 2000. It took about 10 years and cost about $3 billion. Fast forward to 2009, and our group at Dana-Farber sequenced the first ovarian cancer genome. This time it took us about 6 weeks, and it cost us about $150,000. Now it's 2013. We can sequence a complete human genome in under 2 weeks for less than $5,000. In practical context, what this really means is that we can generate an extraordinary amount of data. It's really an unprecedented capacity to generate information now. So computational biology is the field that tries to turn all these mountains of information into knowledge, and from knowledge into understanding. I've really spent my career working in the startup space in computational biology, and through these companies have touched on companies all over the world, companies and organizations all over the world, and have seen how this technology has impacted the entire field, starting with basic research and then into clinical and translational research. And today we're seeing the emergence of genomics into mainstream medicine. In many fields of medicine, and in particular in oncology, we can use genomics today to guide specific treatment decisions in a very practical and cost-effective way. So in a very short period of time in my field, I've seen how innovation has taken something from an esoteric science into something that's directly impacting millions of people's lives. So today I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of a company called GenoSpace. We develop advanced software tools for the collection, interpretation, and sharing of clinical and genomic information for the advancement of biomedical research and to help drive personalized medicine. When I think about why innovation is important, I think when you work in life sciences, and especially in a clinical setting, it's always, that answer is always really clear. You know, where I was previous to GenoSpace, I was working at Dana-Farber, and when you go through a place like the pediatric oncology unit on your way to the office every day, it's really clear why you're doing what you're doing. So for me personally, it's never been about technology for technology's sake. It's trying to apply these great technologies in ways that are going to help us to live happier, healthier lives.
Great, thank you. Now we'll turn to the larger corporate perspective. Laurence, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why innovation is so important from your perspective?
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Laurence Vigeant-Langlois. I'm Director of Business Development and Technology Partnerships for Sikorsky Innovations. Sikorsky is part of United Technologies, headquartered in Connecticut, and a major manufacturer of helicopters and provides helicopter maintenance services and sells helicopters to the military and commercial markets. Let's see, I've been with Sikorsky a year and a half so far, and my role involves managing a team that defines and shapes requirements for our future products, as well as business development, really looking outside the organization for partnering with universities, with companies large and small. And so innovation, why is this important to us? Well, economic theory says that major contributing factors to economic growth are related to investing in intellectual capital and in innovation. And for us, it really means, for United Technologies and for Sikorsky, that innovation allows us to maintain our competitive edge by investing in new technology, in new products, in new processes, in new business concepts, and to access new markets, essentially. So it's at the core of our business, obviously. So we do spend a lot of investment dollars to bring new products and new technology to market. And some notable examples include the X2 technology demonstrator, which allowed us to bring helicopter speeds from what used to be plateaued at around 150 knots, almost 200 miles an hour, to 250 knots, which is almost 300 miles an hour, with some pretty fascinating new technology, including rigid coaxial rotor and advanced flight controls and fly-by-wire technology. So we do a significant amount of internal R&D, but at the same time we realized that there can be a not invented here syndrome, and we absolutely need to overcome that by looking outside our organization, tapping into smart brains all over the world, and really accessing markets, know-how, intellectual property, talent in universities and companies that we want to team with. And as such, we do invest in small companies. We'll do, of course, acquisitions and other things, but it certainly is at the core of our business. A little bit of background about myself. So I have a mix of, I guess, technical and financial and flight operations experience. So I have 3 degrees in engineering, including a PhD from MIT, and have flown Learjets commercially for a small airline, and have worked in product management, bringing to market some of the research I had worked on with a sister company to the Weather Channel. And then also have been a customer and financial investor in new commercial airplanes and engines for a major aircraft leasing company headquartered in New York. So certainly gives me complementary perspectives on basically trying to innovate and bring new products to market.
Terrific, thank you. And Steve, can you tell us a bit about your background and why innovation is so important to you?
Sure. Thanks, Cynthia. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Liguori. I'm the executive director for what we call innovation and new models at GE. We're a great Connecticut company. It's great to be here, and great to be headquartered here. My family and I live down the road, not too far. So it's, when you're the director of innovation at GE, whether it's like either my mom or my professional friends, I say, like, that's like a really cool title. And then there's always a pregnant pause, and I say, like, what do you do? So I'll try and explain that a little bit to you, but maybe if I could hold that. I mean, I think, since probably most of us who are here from Connecticut probably have a good idea for GE, but sometimes I'm always surprised at it. In terms of what we do. Obviously, I'm sure you all know us for our appliances and household goods and things like that, But how many of you know that, I'm sure you've all flown on airplanes, 3 out of 4 commercial jetliners in the world have our jet engines on the jetliners. That's what we like to say is like one of our average size divisions. That's a $20 billion division in GE. You've probably all at some point, either you or a loved one, been in a hospital, you've gotten an x-ray, a CAT scan, an ultrasound, an MRI. We make about half of all those pieces of hospital equipment in the world. And if you've ever actually flipped on a light switch, which I suspect we all have done, we make 40% of the electricity. Going back to the General Electric part of General Electric, we actually we make the stuff that powers the grid, the generators and all the infrastructure to do that. The reason kind of to bring that in is my job's only about a year old at GE, and I've been at GE coming up on 7 years now. I actually grew up as a consumer marketer, and now I work with big heavy technology in GE. But I work, my job was designed at GE to talk about the new types of innovation. So I don't want to say there's traditional innovation and new innovation, but we like to think about it as technical innovation and business model innovation. So technical innovation is how are we going to come up with the next generation of CAT scan machine that's hopefully going to find the cancer sooner on you or a loved one so that it can be cured before it does major damage. And we'll continue to do that. I think that's our legacy. It's the invention of physical, better technology. Some people call it, the next widget or the next best mousetrap. Think of the refrigerator you might have versus what your parents or your grandparents might have had, or the washing machine or something like that. So that's a physical technology-based innovation. The innovation that I've been asked to come in and help bring to GE and across all GE is this whole new area of what are new businesses? I don't mean like new businesses we're going to go necessarily buy a new business. I mean something like and I've seen people already on this. In fact, I'm going to have to take a picture so I can tweet this out. My distinguished panel here. Hi. Okay, thanks. I'll take a picture of you guys too. So we can get that out there. All right, I'll tweet this when we get done. So why do you buy these now? Okay, there's not too many of us actually buy it and worry about the quality of the phone call. You're probably buying it for those things called apps on it. Who can handle the best apps? If I asked you 6 years ago, what's your favorite app? Can anyone tell me what your answer would have had to have been? What's an app?
Yeah.
Okay? Because the App Store is not even 6 years old yet from Apple, let alone Android. Okay? Apple has now downloaded, just Apple, north of 50 billion apps. Okay? They've created a multi-$100 billion ecosystem of apps. So literally, it's a business model, that's the term we use, that didn't exist before. Now, we're not looking to get into the phone business, or we're not looking to get into the app business per se, but we've introduced this big new concept, and I was telling Cynthia before I just flew back from San Francisco last night. We did a conference on big data, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about what is, we hear about it in the healthcare space. We've got a term out there we're calling the industrial internet. It's bringing the power of the internet that we all know as consumers into the industrial world to run all these big major industries dramatically better. Save fuel, get better health care, improve productivity, things like that. So in a nutshell, that's what I do from my perspective, working across all the GE divisions with a lot of outside. They could be inventors, they could be entrepreneurs, they could be professors, they could be just smart people or interesting people, and then try and somehow serve as a mix master to put that together.
Great, thanks. I want to pick up on a theme that several of you have mentioned, and you do have a cool title, Steve, so maybe I will ask you first. So, GE is obviously large, huge, global organization. You've got, people all over the world who've been working in certain ways and been relatively successful. So how is it that you're encouraging innovation or an innovative spirit within GE?
Well, that's, if I could go off. I could tell you about the days where, you have to hit your head against the wall. Or I could tell you about the days where you go, yes, we're making great progress. Look, anytime you're part of any organization, here we're at Arts and Ideas. I don't think this is different in the arts or in business or in society. Any organization that's successful in any kind of an area kind of likes to say, well, this is what made me successful. And over time, you find out that if you let what makes you successful define you going forward, you can kind of inadvertently calcify yourself and don't get it. And we see that with our culture a lot. We're a 135-year-old company, okay? That's got tremendous strengths, tremendous weaknesses, I can tell you, if you feel like it when you get done, go Google an article from the New York Times yesterday where a reporter said about us from this conference we did on big data 2 days ago, the hottest technology company in Silicon Valley right now just might be a 135-year-old GE. That was the byline in the company. Well, how the heck does that happen? We prod, we do different things, we bring stuff in, we encourage people, you just got to keep trying. And what I maybe just had one piece and then turn it over to my colleagues here is you have to be careful not to let people feel like you're threatening to blow up what we call the mothership. Because I got to tell you, as a business person, I don't make money per se for GE. I don't sell per se for GE. I'm trying to find new ideas for the future for GE. So I need my colleagues who run the day-to-day business to be successful. So I'm always trying to say, like, can you let me take a Skunk Works team or some small teams? Let's go experiment and try new things. We're not here to threaten what you do. We're here to try and find tomorrow. So we try and maybe do a little bit like that, like the core business and the new business is kind of how we think about it.
Laurence, you talked a little bit a few minutes ago about how you're working with academics, how you're working with smaller organizations, and you've gotten just terrific press on some of the awards that you've given to other organizations who are innovative. Can you talk a little bit about how that fits in with your larger culture?
Sure. Well, let me start by talking about the 90 years of innovation within Sikorsky. So Sikorsky is celebrating its 90th anniversary this year. And Igor Sikorsky was really an innovator, an entrepreneur, living the American dream, really came from Russia at the time and wanted to bring to market some new aviation technology. And then really, crossed a few milestones, including flying the first 4-engine commercial aircraft, and then the first U.S.-based commercial helicopter, and in the company, and he's innovated tremendously over his legacy, and so has the company really tried to maintain that culture of innovation. So so Sikorsky Innovations itself was launched about 3 years ago, but really repackaged some of the R&D that we were doing that really pushed the envelope in terms of internal efforts, and then really also structured our way to interface with the outside with other organizations. As such, and specifically, we launched in February 2012, so about a year and a half ago, a new Sikorsky Entrepreneurial Challenge, which is really a business plan competition run by a large company, and that's really focused on tapping into small companies, companies that are in the growth, early growth phase of their business cycle, and provides us with a channel to interface with them, and offers them incubation support in a local business incubator, the Stanford Innovation Center, then provides them with coaching services both from this business incubator as well as from Sikorsky directly on technology and on business aspects, and then looks at them for an investment evaluation. And really, part of the value proposition we think we offer to those companies is that we could, of course, be investing in their business, but we can also provide them with a customer perspective if they're upstream of our business, for example. And we could be an early adopting customer of their technology or business model that could even be destined to broader industry verticals beyond aerospace or beyond rotorcraft. So that's one concrete way that's been a great learning experience for us. Also successful in certainly attracting interesting businesses that are actually both upstream and downstream of our business. Some of them that can become supplier to us, and then others who can be partners and strategic collaborators with our customers, for example. So it's been a great road. And then to touch on your earlier point around culture, we also launched earlier this year, actually for the 90th anniversary day of the Sikorsky company, an internal challenge targeted to our employees, and really here with in mind the objective to incubate and transformational ideas from our employees, and also to stimulate employee engagement. So really trying to impact the culture and provide a channel for employees who might have ideas, might have very relevant experience to bringing value to us and to our customers that might not be what they're working on in their day-to-day activities.
That's interesting. So is that in that program that you launched around the anniversary of the company? Is that oriented around specific problems that Sikorsky is trying to solve?
So the way we've structured, interestingly, both the external challenge launched earlier and the internal one has been to anchor the topics in 5 questions. Some of them are technology questions, other are business concept questions. And we ask folks to submit entries, whether it's new businesses on the outside or whether it's employees by themselves or as teams, to align with one of those questions. So of course, there's a big piece of that process, which is around, let's identify what are the valuable questions to ask that can move the needle for us as a company. And so that could be tapping into unmet technology needs or places where we can bring complementary efforts and resources to addressing some of them. So we're certainly working very collaboratively with our senior management and our subject matter experts and technical fellows and a key group of employees.
Great. Mick, we've just heard from the large corporate perspective. So can you share a little bit with us about, more entrepreneurial startup organization? What is it that's driving innovation within your organization?
Well, I think I think there's no question that there's a lot of great innovation that's happening at the large multinational corporate level. But I think small companies and startups in particular are and will continue to be the real engine of innovation in our country. And I see 2 primary reasons for this. I think the first is that when you create a startup, you've got the opportunity to create an entire organization around a single idea or opportunity. You can capitalize it appropriately. You can create the right kind of incentives. So you've got the alignment of all the interests involved. You can do this in a way that you're unencumbered by the legacy commitments or processes that inevitably grow in a company over time. And from these, then, in short, you can create really a purpose-built machine that can innovate around where you see an opportunity. I think the second reason is that startups are innovative because they have to be, right? Businesses are very good, once you're a successful business, at protecting that. And they've got a lot of resources, and they get very good at it. Typically, they have a lot more resources than a startup does. And so it's a matter of survival. You've got to be disruptive. Better, faster, cheaper. Which one are you? Better be one.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Karti, as you work in various countries around the world, and you and your colleagues bring programs that enhance the lives of people in ways some of us probably can't imagine, how is it that you think about stimulating an innovative spirit so that when you may move on to the next project, that you've started to shift the mindset?
Yeah, so we are fortunate enough to be sort of working with just an incredible array of innovative social enterprises, and I think that the sort of the characteristic or sort of the sort of cultural bond that they have in common is that they're full of people who sort of see a problem or sort of and we were talking about this earlier in developing countries. There's sort of no end of very visible problems, but they see something and say, not, that sucks. They say, that's an incredible opportunity, right? There's no sanitation in the slums. That's a market opportunity. Think of the demand for sanitation in the slums, right? You go to the rural areas in Kenya or Mali or Uganda, how is it possible that farmers today are still using the same methods they did 50, 60 years ago? How is subsistence farming still in existence? And they view that sort of right away as, this is an opportunity, right? And maybe it's an information asymmetry problem, maybe it's sort of an execution problem, maybe it's a supply chain problem, but they're sort of the types of people that say, well, let's do something, let's do it right now. And that's, I think that spirit is incredibly interesting to be around. It's incredibly sort of exciting, and it's sort of it's incredible to work with people who seeing a problem, they are incredibly analytical in figuring out what the constraint is, right? What is the binding constraint that sort of creates this problem, and how can I address it? So yeah, that's sort of an incredibly exciting problem. And
Karti, I'd love to add on. I think the perspective you have, in addition to Mick's, which is like, big company, startup company, there's also developed countries, undeveloped countries, and all of us who live in this incredible surrounding, sometimes it's just stunning the differences when you get out there. We had a team at GE a few years ago with a baby warmer. So you have a preemie baby, and obviously it's very critical, give them critical care. And our healthcare division is based in Milwaukee, and one of those units can cost like $25,000 to go buy it. Well, you go to developing parts of the world, and it's like a non-starter. You're not going to sell one of these things for $25,000. So the team in Milwaukee was asked, like, you got to cost reduce it, and they were like, wow, we got it from $25,000 to $22,000, which was still totally a non-starter. So they did amazing things, so we actually put a research center, which we now have in Bangalore. We have another one in Shanghai. We have another one in Rio we're building. We have another one in Munich. So we're actually distributed globally to try and do this. But the team in India, one of the things you do is you have the light and you have the bed that the baby's in. And there's in the U.S. there's electronics and electric motors that move it up and down so you can get exactly the right height, and electronic controls to get the right temperature. So the first thing the team in India did is they threw out the electric motor and the controls, and you know how you get the right adjustment between the lamp and the thing? It's called a hand crank. Okay, and it costs about $2.50 versus $1,000 to put it. So that type of innovation, I think, is really. You got to I guess what part of what I've learned, you got to come out with different lens, and somehow this community, I think we all, even in the innovation community, tend to think of innovation with our own lenses, and there's just a wealth of information. I think I personally find it very valuable when the communities can collaborate and share different stories to open up different ideas.
That's a great transition to open innovation. Mick, can you talk a little bit about how important that may or may not be to your organization? And what you really think it means, too.
So we think this is tremendously important, and we see this as a big movement that's happening in healthcare. Everyone talks about big data. Through data comes the ability to do analysis, to figure out what's working, what's not working. And I think a lot of people recognize that one of the real challenges in healthcare is a lack of access to the information. A big part about what we're trying to do at GenoSpace is to break some of those barriers. We think look at the power of the internet. I think one of the things that's played out over and over again on the internet is disintermediation, right? Getting things directly into the hands of people. Do we go to travel agents anymore? No, we go online and we book flights. We have direct access to the information. We want to apply a similar type of methodology to healthcare, give people direct capabilities to get access to their medical information, and then create secure online forums where they can start to put this information together, to communicate with each other, to join research. We want to create open environments where you can take population scale data and put that in the hands of brilliant graduate students all over the world that are trying to find answers. So we see this as being incredibly important and a real opportunity. I think where there's opportunity, there's also risk. Open access information can be a little bit scary, especially when you start talking about health and medical data. So security is certainly really important. And I think, and this is something we were talking about earlier too, is obviously I believe in small companies and businesses for innovation, but I think we see an important aspect of this from the public sector as well. We need the right kind of climate that's going to help people to feel that they're not putting themselves at too much risk to participate. We think it has tremendous potential to advance medical research, but how do we mitigate some of the fear and anxiety that goes along with that? How can we help to prevent discrimination or lack of access to care because people are sharing their data? So we see this as something that is going to be hard to do from the private sector, and we probably need some better direction from the public side as well.
Interesting, yeah. Are there any examples from the large corporate perspective on open innovation? Anything specific or concrete that you're able to share?
I can build on some of the stuff Laurence has mentioned. We, in the world of experimentation, this is a little bit cultural, but I think really profound. We've done a couple of open challenges. There's two kinds of challenges. I grew up in the consumer marketing world, and I worked at Pepsi for a while. And my friends at Pepsi still do open challenges. In fact, they do a lot of them. It's like, let's come up with the next flavor of Mountain Dew or the next can design or something like that. And you know what? That works, and anyone can do it. In fact, you see the commercials on the Super Bowl. Those are done through open innovation or crowdsourcing. Like, just film a commercial and send it in. We've done 2 open challenges recently. One around how can you improve the checkout experience at a hospital, and we got over 200 submissions of people trying to design apps, if you would, not an app for you as a patient, but an app for the healthcare professionals at the hospital to be able to coordinate and organize all the information you needed to do before you check out. And we gave out prizes for that, and it's there's a lot of complicated stuff underneath it, but I think you can see the value if you can do something like that. We did another one around, since we've mentioned big data now a couple of times, we did another one around why flight paths are so inefficient. Now again, as a general public, you might not know that, but unfortunately for all of us as travelers and people who just live in the world, 20% of all the jet fuel purchased globally is wasted every day. And it's wasted every day by planes taxiing, sitting on the runway, taking flight paths that are incomplete, weather, you name it. And the airline industry clearly wants to try and improve this. And they've been working on it for years. We went out and did an open innovation challenge. We launched it at the end of last year. And in a period of 8 weeks, we signed up thousands upon thousands of data scientists who in 8 weeks were able to dramatically improve the results of what the aviation industry had been working on for years. And you think, like, how did that happen? Well, through crowdsourcing, we were able to, by the way, I have no idea who these people are, other than we found an actuary in Singapore, a college professor literally in the middle of some town in Russia, and a physician in Budapest who solved these problems. None of them have any aviation experience, as in 0, but they're all data scientists, and they like doing algorithms and math. To them, it's almost like a game. And so there's a cross-hatching that can go on with all these things that I think the world is just discovering in terms of what we can do.
Yeah, I think open innovation is certainly something that's increasing in popularity and momentum. So we mentioned the Sikorsky Entrepreneurial Challenge, reaching out to small businesses, trying to tap into the work that they're doing. The iPrize, which is our internal challenge. And then we also participate in a human-powered helicopter competition, which is actually administered by a separate entity, the American Helicopter Society. But basically, we went public announcing the prize and offering that prize for the American Helicopter Society to manage it about 30 years ago. And at the time, textbook theory, so professors, covering helicopter science and all that, basically made statements in textbooks saying that this was not possible, and why is Sikorsky wasting those students' time? So it was targeted to universities with targeting something that involved basically flying a human-powered helicopter to 60 seconds of flight in a box of 10 meters by 10 meters with basically 10 feet above the ground. And so it was definitely, setting stretch goals in 3 dimensions. And the prize was at $50,000 for many, many years. And just a few years ago, Sikorsky increased the prize to try to increase the attention and the momentum to try to solve it to $250,000. And tremendous progress was made by specifically, 2 universities, University of Maryland and a company that's issued from the University of Toronto in Canada. And we heard that basically the first claim to have met all 3 criteria in one flight was done last week. There's still education, so we're probably another week from finding out whether that record and record flight was really achieved. But stay tuned for press that actually the Wall Street Journal front page covered a story about a month ago on that. So stay tuned for more on this. But essentially, I think it's kind of neat to look at how by setting stretch goals and asking teams to demonstrate, that they can meet those goals, that you can stretch the imagination of the students, you can identify talent that you might want to bring on board, and really prove through experiment and experiential initiatives things that theory might actually say that, hey, this is not doable and possible. Yeah. So I think it's very fascinating to see that we can exploit open innovation probably in many ways that haven't been done as much, including with our customers, with our suppliers, going forward as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear about how both very large organizations are using techniques that several years ago, may have been considered more of a risk. Well, at this point, I'd like to see what questions or comments we have from each of you. Is there something that you'd love to follow up on with one of the panelists, to ask them about how they stimulate innovation within their organization or how they think about it culturally?
First of all, I'd like to applaud you for the progress that you're all making in your respective fields. But I'd also like to pose a bit of a problem for your response. We know that much of what you do creates efficiencies for society, improves the level of service to society, but it also creates a great deal of human displacement in society. That which is disruptive in the technological sense also becomes disruptive in the human and social sense. So what are your companies doing with that awareness? I recall reading one expert in the field who made the point that everybody is focusing on the progress of their technology, but nobody is focusing on the broader consequences of that in terms of the impact on civil society, social society, and what's left in the wake. So how do we manage that transition as well as the transition of your technologies to a better future?
Great question.
That's a good question.
Excellent.
I'd be happy to take a start. I think it's an absolutely spot on question. First, I just maybe as a reference, if you're interested in that, there's a great book written by two MIT professors that came out just late last year called Race Against the Machines by Eric Bjornson and Andy McAfee that delves into exactly what you're talking about. And the thesis behind a lot of this is, heck, you could go back to the cotton gin and talk about disruption and people. The nature of technology, if you do the history of it, is there's always short-term disruption at the point of the technology or the innovation that, at least until now, and hopefully will continue, has led to greater societal good and greater job creation, even though some of the disruptions in there. So that's the theory. So what about in the practice? And I think people hope it would be. I can tell you two things that I know we are doing is. We are, first of all, we brought back several thousand jobs from Mexico and overseas into the United States to make, for instance, GE appliances. But there's a huge amount of training that went along because the jobs are higher tech now than they used to be. And so there's an education component, there's a training component, and what we found we've had to do, and we do this, is you have to do a lot of high-tech training. And so we're increasing partnerships with universities to try and improve training, but we're also doing outright training. We're doing training for veterans, but a lot of it comes into the higher tech area where a lot of the future jobs will be. So that's at least what we're looking to do. And we actually do training fairs and what we call maker fairs in about a half a dozen cities across the U.S. specifically. In this case, where we try and bring people in and teach them specifically new age job skills.
Quick response from me. So I'll speak about Sikorsky rather than United Technologies, but since I'm more familiar with that piece of the business. But so Sikorsky has grown tremendously over the years and actually about tripled in size over a 6-year period about years ago. So tremendous growth. Of course, tremendous growth internationally is part of it. But in addition, the company has grown the jobs in Connecticut specifically. So I think, certainly in some emerging economies that we're trying to serve in countries around the world, they're increasing requirements for job creation and technology transfer. But, we're very proud to look at the data and see that we've grown jobs even locally in the U.S. and in Connecticut. Now, from the perspective of how do we look at results and metrics of success, of course, one lens that we use is around the triple bottom line. So it's about looking at financial results, of course, but also the impact we have on our environment. And, we're very proud of some of the cogeneration and other other processes and technology that we're using in order to be environmentally friendly. And then there's the social piece, obviously, where we want to be, and we're very encouraged to be involved in our communities. And another tidbit that actually relates to United Technologies is that I think it was last year, United Technologies crossed the $1 billion spend with its Employee Scholar Program, where it's basically paying for its employees to get additional degrees, university degrees. So very, very significant investments in its people and in the communities that surround, where the company operates. So I think that's a very important topic to us as well.
Mick or Karti, do you have a thought on the question about job destruction? And
I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think there's no question that the role of, I think the way that people are approaching jobs and careers is very different today than it has been traditionally. I think there's a lot lower barriers to entry. I think people are much more open to, people don't expect to go into a job they're going to have for the rest of their lives anymore. I think people are piecing together careers now in interesting ways. There's a lot, I think there's certainly, I think it's going to present real challenges and real displacement, and it's going to be hard to tackle. I think what I hope comes out of it is a greater access to people, lower barriers of entry, where people can do different things, can piece together their own careers, can evolve over time. I think I don't know what it's going to be like exactly, but I can tell you, I think it's going to be very different.
yeah, interesting. Do you have a view on this, Karti?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I'm certainly not qualified to speak on sort of how technology sort of, changes returns to capital versus returns to labor and sort of drives social inequality and whatever else. That seems to be like an absolutely sort of a topic worthy of much consideration. And it probably just sort of increases the need for higher quality education. But I mean, I guess in our case, I would say that, can you borrow techniques from the GEs of the world, right, and use them to attack deeply rooted social problems, right? Can I mean, at its best, right, innovation is not just a means to increase profits, but it's, using the same sort of ethos, the same tools, can you attack HIV prevention or sanitation or agriculture and livelihoods to disrupt the status quo in those industries? And I think I would say yes. So there's plenty of people and plenty of apps and plenty of technologies that are trying to disrupt the status quo in civil society and sort of policymaking and whatever else. So I don't think this is an ethos that's restricted to the for-profit sector. And second, I think, again, at its best, and maybe this is not always the case, at its best, innovation is creating public goods, right? I mean, the easiest example is Google. They invested and they've created something that has fundamentally changed how we think about information. And at its best, creating open access to medical records, and that's something that we would all benefit from it. And I, obviously, some hospital operators and hospital lobbyists will lose their job along the way, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. But but we all sort of, in even the sort of the medium term, we all benefit from that. And I feel like that has to be, like Steve said, the short-term disruption needs to be weighed against sort of the medium and long-term benefit that hopefully accrues to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Are there some other questions or comments, speaker?
Thank you. Yes. My name is Brendan Sharkey, and I currently serve the state of Connecticut in our legislature as the Speaker of the House. And so my interests, of course, are somewhat parochial in that I care very much about the state and what we can do. I was glad that you mentioned the cotton gin, of course, which is from Eli Whitney, from my hometown of Hamden. And of course, we're doing other things like making sure that we're acknowledging Gustav Whitehead as the actual first in flight, as opposed to the Wright brothers, who was in Bridgeport. These are important things. But in all seriousness, I think in my capacity as speaker, and I think for those of us who are in the public sector, We are very interested, and I think here in Connecticut in particular, we're focusing heavily on the notion of what's the role of the public sector in promoting the kind of innovation that you all are doing internally and are familiar with. Some will tell us that the best thing that we can do is to do nothing, meaning get out of your way, let you take the ball and run with it, reduce regulation, reduce taxes, and otherwise just let you do your own thing. Others take the exact opposite point of view, in that, no, we need to invest in our colleges and universities to ensure that we're providing smart people who are capable of picking up the mantle, but also that we need to work on doing things like creating a sense of place and a sense of synergies in terms of the social environment that encourages folks to come to our state and innovate through your companies and through others. So what do you see as the proper role and appropriate role of the public sector of government in facilitating what you're trying to do?
Great question. Who wants to take this one first?
I'll jump first on this one, I guess. So I think there's a couple of important things you can do. I mean, I think I can tell you, as we were sitting here today, both of us, co-founders of small companies, one of the biggest challenges we talk about, where do we find the engineers? We've got a global hunt to try and find capable software engineers that can create the applications that are driving all of this stuff, and we can't find them. So I think obviously, spending on education is a part of it. I think, from my experience, I think in terms of starting a company, it's incredible how many different types of skills you need. It's creating the ecosystem. I think it's creating a hub of innovation around the great universities you have here. I think that can drive a lot of it. But then it's creating the ecosystem that can help it transition all the great thoughts out of the universities into a small company. It's having flexible workspaces and having the human resources. People talk a lot about starting companies and needing capital. I think human capital is much more important than real capital in terms of it's having the right kinds of expertise and resources that can help to nurture and develop those companies. It's having the support system. So I think the last point I would make is around is on this point of open innovation. I think we're moving towards a world where we have so much access to information, and I think we need leadership from the public sector in helping to protect people from discrimination, giving people access to care, to really drive the kind of innovation we think is really possible in healthcare. That can be a little bit scary for people, but I think it's going to take leadership from government to help create the right kind of culture, to help push businesses along, give people access to their data. There's a huge movement in New York, Blue Button movement, started the VA, requiring hospitals. You should be able to get your data being downloaded in machine-readable format. Government's pushing this. This is going to drive a lot of innovation. I think that'd be a great thing for Connecticut to pick up on. So those are just a couple ideas I can think of.
I would build on the education piece. I hope that's clear for everyone. I mean, it's great that we're here at Yale, but I mean, we have the same thing. I mean, you hear about high unemployment, and we can't hire engineers, and we can't hire a program, but we literally cannot find the people. So does that mean we're going to go to India or wherever else to go to get them? I think there's clearly an education component that I hope everyone would support. I think there is a public place, though. A lot of people talk about less regulation. I think certainly GE would raise their hand, as pretty much any business would around less regulation. But I think one of the things we're beginning to get, which almost sounds a little contradictory to this open innovation in the global community, is we're beginning to think about nexuses or places of innovation, as in physical places. There's a huge amount of activity going around. So like, you got Silicon Valley, you got Silicon Alley, and now we have the Silicon Savannah. Okay, well, Brooklyn is now getting into the game in New York City. The old Brooklyn Naval Yards is becoming an incubator for startups. So I think the idea of physically putting a place together where innovation can happen, and the reason I know about that is because we're in discussions with them about should we help underwrite something like that, where startups can meet big businesses, can meet education. There's a physicality that I think any type of innovation community would love to have. And I think the public sector can absolutely figure out ways to do that, because even though we're all global and we're all digital, you still can't beat being able to, sit across from someone and, ideate and say, what did you learn, what did you learn, and figure out how to do that. And somehow I think the world's got to figure out how to do both.
Yeah.
So I'd like to build on that and mention that I completely agree on the education piece, and certainly, STEM initiatives to bring talent that is trained in science, technology, engineering, math is certainly very, very important to us. And I think, Connecticut and UConn and efforts are certainly very important. I'd like to build on the incubator piece and actually, talk to successes of Connecticut in sponsoring innovation hubs, 4 of them across the state. And Sikorsky has actually, taken advantage of that by sponsoring one of them in Stamford, the Stamford Innovation Center. And that's been very helpful to us that, first of, that incubator was launched because that's been, we identified it as a way to not only, launch our Open Innovation Initiative around our entrepreneurial challenge, but offer a carrot to the entrepreneurs to come work with us physically, because there's a lot of value in that interaction, in-person interaction, and having a footprint that's near where our headquarters is located, where actually we're running that initiative from, and really providing a forum and an ecosystem and access for these companies that have, in some instances, relocated to tap into investment, whether it's from Connecticut and the hedge fund capital of the world, or even the New York market for that reason, which is in proximity. And then whether it's about tapping into all the other service providers that typically are part of an incubator, whether it's legal and accounting and other services, and then really also learning from other entrepreneurs that are going through similar journeys. So I think those ecosystems are very, very important, and we've had the fortune of aligning with one of them and tapping into the benefits of that. So it's been great, and we look forward to continuing it.
Karti, do you have a view on the role of government?
I think I'm a little bit too micro for that.
Great. Well, I'm terribly sorry that we're out of time, but we're happy to stay around and have some private conversations with any of you about innovation. I applaud you all for coming. Thank you. And just in quick summary, I not only applaud you for coming, but I hope that you will think about a lot of the conversations that we had this evening, and think about how you can embrace innovation in your lives and how we can enhance our own lives and the lives of those to come. So thanks again. Have a good evening.